Welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. Join Marti Dumas and Elena Page on their quest to help children's and middle grade authors find the right audience and sell more books. Hi, and welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. I'm Marti Dumas.
And I'm Elena Page.
And we are here today with author Karen Inglis. Inglis is of The Secret Lake, Eek, The Runaway Alien, Henry Haynes and the Great Escape, Walter Brown and the Magician's Hat, and Ferdinand Fox's Big Sleep. She started writing children's books when her now grown-up sons were toddlers. Those books sat in a box for 10 years before Karen decided that it was time to dust them off, edit them up, and bring them out into the world. Today, more than 10,000 children have enjoyed her books, and we are excited to have her on the show. Welcome, Karen.
Well, my pleasure. It's an absolute delight to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, everyone. Where are you?
I'm in London, in UK, southwest London to be precise, which is, I'm about probably half an hour's drive east of Heathrow Airport. If you've been to London, I'm sort of into London, about half an hour in from Heathrow. That might give you an idea.
Yeah. Okay. So the only place I've never actually been to London, the only place I've been in London is Heathrow Airport, and I was there for 8 hours. So
well, there you go. You were about half an hour away.
There we go, at that time. We love this southern part of the United States. We love how cool. So thank you for joining us from UK. So let's just dive right in. I have a huge question. So you have been writing children's books since way back when, but you started looking into publishing your children's books in 2010. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the first time I looked into the self-publishing angle, actually. So what had happened was when I wrote the early drafts of The Secret Lake and Ferdinand Fox back in, when the kids were little, sort of early to mid-90s, I did send out a few manuscripts to publishers at the time, and that was that thing of you send them off, you wait 6 weeks, and then you get a brown envelope back, mostly saying thanks, but no thanks. I did get a couple saying, The Secret Lake's too traditional, it's the wrong length, and blah, 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 and don't write rhyming stories because you can't translate them, that kind of thing. So I did do that route to begin with, but then I put them all away, as you said in the intro, into a box because my day job is writing. I'm a professional writer, and I did think, look, I could be here forever, and how do I know when someone's ever going to publish my book? I better go back and get paid for my writing. So I went back and did that, and it was in 2010 that I'd been doing my consultancy for quite a while, and I thought I'm going to have a year off. I was in a position I was able to do that. I was lucky. And I pulled the stories back out and looked at them and edited them. But then the more I started to look around, there's suddenly this self-publishing hit. I suddenly noticed people in America were talking all about this self-publishing and create space. And so that was when the idea came to me, actually, I'm not going to send them out again. I'm quite capable of writing professionally. I've been working on content websites. I think I'm going to investigate the self-publishing side of things.
So that's amazing. I love the indie spirit and all the things where it's like, you know what? I am very capable, and I feel like these stories, if traditional, are still important to have out there because they're very good. I've actually read The Secret Lake, and it's a really lovely story. My question for you, though, is what would you do? Like, would you do the same thing over again now? What would you do differently now if you were starting today in 2017 versus back when you actually got your first books out around 2011?
In terms of approaching publishers or doing self-publishing, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I suppose because I'm now so into the indie mode, I'd probably say to myself, knowing me, I would probably go the indie route. But equally, you've got nothing to lose by sending your books out. The only thing I would say, as we all know, is that, if eventually you did get that deal, unless you're going to become an incredible bestseller, which I think you're much more likely to become a mid-list author, as they say. So you're not going to sell in huge numbers. Then, you know, you're going to lose all that creative control. Your royalties on your sales are going to be a lot lower. I think it's something like 7.5%. Compared with, you know, certainly for, as we know, ebooks can be up to 70% with self-publishing, and certainly, you know, it kind of can work out at a good 30–40% if you're selling in print. So it would be difficult. I mean, I just think you'd have to. I couldn't advise somebody which route to go. They have to follow your heart, I think, and there's nothing to prevent you starting one way and then trying out self-publishing if perhaps you just wouldn't wait around as long as you might have done in the olden days to get a traditional deal, if you see what I mean. I mean, there are definitely advantages to the traditional deal in that, well, first of all, it probably gives you self-confidence that you might not have to start with, especially if you're at a first, you know, it's a debut novel. And of course, ultimately, things like foreign rights, that's something that, you know, in fact, I have been approached by a foreign rights agent in the last week, actually, and I have previously been approached by publishers in Turkey and Germany. But it is navigating that whole foreign rights side of things. I think that's, if you're traditionally published, perhaps you've got, you know, that's a simpler route to go, I suppose. But on balance, you know, the great thing I think is if you're starting out today, there is so much more opportunity for you, and you've got all these wonderful tools at your disposal that you can try out. And, you know, even if you're not going to, maybe, you know, perhaps you might have some short stories you wanted to try the self-publishing route with, just to try your hand at. But, you know, I think it would just be down to each individual as to which way they would go.
Yeah. So that's, first of all, a perfectly lovely indie answer, because isn't that the whole thing, that everyone gets to sort of follow their heart, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you were starting today, what would you do now that you either would do again that you did before, or that you would do differently? Maybe because there are different tools, maybe because you have had that makes you think that this would be a better decision. What would you do differently if you were starting right now in 2017?
Well, I think the piece of advice I always give to starting out authors, and I'm sure we all know about this, is making sure that you don't just write your book and think, well, that's it, great story, I'm going to get it out there. You want to make use of beta readers and editors who know about children's writing, I would say. Now, I think, you know, a lot of people perhaps might make the mistake of thinking you can just write a children's book and put it up there. And I think a lot of people, perhaps back in the olden days, you know, a lot of people starting out now might be tempted to do that. Now, interestingly, even back in the day when I first brought out The Secret Lake and Ferdinand Fox, I didn't just write them and send them out to publishers. I used a service which actually was really ahead of its time. It's called the Writers' Advice Centre for Children's Books. And they were not an agent, but they are children's experts. They've worked in, well, the woman who runs it was actually ex-head of Puffin UK. And they offered a critique service at a very, very reasonable rate. You know, it was something like, back in the day, it was about 50 UK pounds. And she read The Secret Lake, and I got a written report back telling me what worked, what didn't work. Because I think if you're starting off in children's writing, it's a very specialist area. And there are a lot of things I didn't realize when I first started out, which were things like kids don't really like reading about grown-ups, and I had grown-ups in my book. You know, I mean, stuff that's pretty obvious now, but, you know, and the way my dialogue was, some of it was very grown up, those kinds of things. And also when I started the story, I had this kind of rather long setup going on at the beginning rather than jumping in at the action. And so that kind of feedback I got from people experienced in the children's writing industry was invaluable. What's changed today is there are probably a lot more of those services that you can avail yourself of online. I mean, I would still recommend, certainly anyone in the UK, the Writers' Advice Centre for Children's Books, run by Louise Jordan. But there is, of course, places like Readsy that you can go to now where you can find experienced children's editors. I mean, this is after you've tested it with your local audiences. And again, you know, I kind of finding it hard to say what would I do different, because even back in that day, I went to the local library, which I happen to live 2 doors away from, so I'm very lucky. But I did say to them, have you got any children who might be prepared to read my first draft of The Secret Lake? So that kind of thing. So I managed to find myself people whose kids would read the book and get some feedback from them. So, you know, it's interesting, you know, in the sense of, I don't know that there is anything different that I would do, and that probably is the honest answer. I'd probably be more useful to give you tips on, if you're starting out, what you should do, rather than what I think I would do differently, if that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I would just say, my big tip would be somebody just starting out. One thing is to be aware of, I personally find when you're writing for young children, whether it's, you know, picture books or up to age 12, in my case, and I know, Marti, you've said the same, 99% of my book sales are in print. So even though we have this wonderful internet, it is actually the print book where you're going to make most of your sales. And on top of that, I find most of those print book sales take place face-to-face when I go into schools. So you do need to be prepared to go out and meet your audience. It's getting better selling online in print, and we'll come on to that separately. But I would say, if you're starting out, think local, get your book written, get some feedback if you can, maybe with the library or something. What do children think of your books? Or, you know, perhaps you've got a friendly teacher in a school who might be prepared to. I mean, with Walter Brown and the Magician's Hat, I did that. There was a year 3 and 4 in a school in North London who read the draft before I actually had the book, and I got some feedback. They did it in their half-term holidays, and I gave them a little questionnaire, you know, did you find it boring, or which bits were boring, or, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm slightly lost myself now, but it is very much, and then, yes, get that feedback. And when you do have your first book, let's pretend at this point that you've decided to self-publish, okay, and you've done all the right things. You've used an editor, you've checked, you've had beta readers, you've got your book. In terms of then selling that print book, you need to make contact with local schools and with your local bookshops and your local library. In fact, my first event I did was, I said to the library, you know, can I come and do a reading of The Secret Lake in the library? And it was a free event, and I was absolutely terrified. And I thought, oh my God, either no one's going to turn up, or there's going to be hundreds of people, and oh, what do I do? But in fact, it was perfect. There were 7 children turned up and 7 adults, so it was just the right number, you know. And the other thing I would say, in terms of schools, you know, trying to get into schools, which is what you want to do, start small, you know, local school. And I would probably say, even though it shouldn't be something to do going forward, but start off by offering to go in for free, to just do a session with them, because schools' budgets are limited, and why are they going to really take you if you're not a well-known author? So, you know, you can just say, you know, I'm local, and I'm offering some free, I'll come in and talk about being an author, and in exchange, could you please send some slips home, or could I stay and offer my books for sale after I've been here? But just gradually, build out gradually. Make sure you've got a good website for bookshops. When you go into bookshops, that's the other thing I should say. We have a chain of bookshops here called Waterstones, which is a national brand, but I just went into the local Waterstones when I first started out, and because they were able to immediately see my website, it was a bit like having a calling card, and it was very clear, and it was branded. At that time, it was the Secret Lakes website that I had, and I made it look very much, it had the look and feel of the book. And I did it all on WordPress. It was totally free, so you don't need to pay huge sums of money for any of this. But just be very careful about branding what you're creating in line with your work and in line with your personality. And it's the usual thing that we all know of being yourself, I suppose. The other thing I would say in terms of approaching bookshops, just getting into local bookshops at least, is I use a combination of Amazon's Create Space for my print books and Lightning Source. Now, any author starting out now would be using Ingram Spark. It's all owned by Ingram, but it was the combination of those two. The reason being that CreateSpace allows you to sell your book on Amazon, and it will always show in stock. Ingram Spark has it's got worldwide distribution, as I'm sure you both know. So what that means in practice is that if your book is with them and someone walks into a bookshop, or you walk into your local bookshop and it's already on the database with Ingram Spark, they will see it on their computer when you talk about your book, which kind of makes it feel it's a real, it's the real deal, as it were. Even if you're going to supply them locally with your own copies on consignment, the fact that they can see it's there in the system lends you credibility. So I would just say, read all the research that you can find on using a combination of CreateSpace and Ingram Spark, and you keep your own ISBN, and you use that same ISBN on each of those platforms, and that covers you and kind of sets you up for selling or being available to be bought in local bookshops, even if they're not stocking you, as it were. Very long.
A lot of like really useful stuff there. I'm sorry, Elena, you go.
When you approach a bookstore, what just buzzed in my ears as you said that was, so you can actually provide them with your own stock directly. Can you offer to do that?
Yeah, I think local bookshops are probably, it's what they call the jargon for that is called supplying on consignment, and that means sale or return. And if you're living locally, you've got your local bookshop, it's much more attractive to them because you are a local author. Because I don't let my books are not available to be returned. So when you sign up with Ingram Spark or Lightning Source, you have to say whether people can return them, and I tick no to that. And so that's kind of a no-no for shops to stock you, really. So therefore you really want to have your own. So therefore what that does, it means if someone happens to walk into the bookshop and say, I want a copy of The Secret Lake, I'm going to place an order, they can still get it for you. But when you've got your local bookshop where you would like them to put them on the shelves, it's much better to take in your own copies. And another advantage of being with Ingram Spark is that you can order those copies. You can order however many you want to be delivered to your house, which you can then use for local bookshops or going into schools or whatever. And you can order those. There's a calculator on the front of the website, and you can work out what those are going to cost you, including postage. And then you can, from that, work out what profit you're going to make, and so on and so forth.
And the problem that I find is that I've been recommended that I should do the 55% discount in order for them to even consider me. And I don't do the return either. But they're full color, 50-page 8x10 books.
Oh, wow. You probably make no money at all.
Right. And well, in order to make $1, like, they're still priced so expensively. And here in Australia, the paperback is $30, $30 Australian dollars for a school to order it, or for somebody to. And I'm like, gosh! And yet, if I ordered it and sold it, I can sell it for $20 and make $10. So
exactly. What I would say is, and there is somewhere on YouTube, there's me talking about kind of the truth about color picture book, is really selling them through a wholesaler in our situation is, you just can't make any money. And where you're going to say, if you're in the color picture book market, it's really it's at events that you're going to do it. And as you say, you then get your own stock, and you can then sell it and make a much better return. I did start off with Ferdinand Fox's Big Sleep through a wholesaler called Gardner's, who then supplied the bookshops, but literally I think I made 10p if they sold a copy of the book. And so coming back to that 55% question that you have, because you get the choice. I mean, Lightning Source, I've got a wider set of choices. I think Ingram Spark is a bit more limited. The reason I don't go for 55%, I in fact go for 45%, is because I figure that because I'm not a household name, nobody's going to, no bookshop's going to stock me that doesn't really know me. To be absolutely honest, I'm not going to find shops up and down the country planning to stock The Secret Lake, even though I desperately think that they should, and maybe in time they will. And so therefore, why would I give a 55% discount? I might as well, because the point being, when I set that discount of 55%, it doesn't just apply to the bookshops, it would apply to if somebody bought it on another online store, if you swear, apart from Amazon. And so I don't want to then be left with, a much smaller margin. So by going for 45%, the way I figure it is, I get a reasonable return if I sell the book online outside of Amazon, because at Amazon I do create space. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop that. There we go. And so there's no point in, sorry, my train of thought just gone quickly. So I don't want to cut off my nose to spite my face that way. And the other point about it is I feel that if somebody does walk into a bookshop and orders The Secret Lake, a local bookshop, a bookshop that doesn't know me, by offering a 45% discount, that still leaves room for the middleman, because they will order through a wholesaler, to take their cut and still end up giving the bookshop probably 30 to 35%. And I did, and which is what they would hope to get at the end of the day. That the reason they want that 55% is it gives the middleman, the wholesaler, their cut, and then the bookshop makes some money. And I did have a conversation with a bookshop owner about all of this way back in the day, and he just said, yeah, I need to know I'll get 30 to 35%. And I think that 45% leaves room for him to make some money, the wholesaler to supply him, and for me to make some money. And that there's no need for me to go to the 55%, because it's only really going to be when people go in and actively ask for my book, that they're likely to stock it. Equally, if they're going to take a punt on me and they don't know me, but they think, yes, I am going to stock the book, they will still make some money. They're just not going to make as much as if I offered 55%. I don't know whether that makes sense, but
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it makes total sense.
It's a really I should mention that the Alliance of Independent Authors, I don't know if either of you are members of the Alliance of Independent.
Yeah.
So am I.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. I mean, what I would say is there's been lots of discussion about using different distributors and the pros and cons of different rates of return and all that kind of thing. So if anyone's a member, it's worth just searching up those topics on there. Yeah.
Right.
And when you go into a school, do you order some from like Ingram, or do you do your own local print run? And how many do you do? Like, I'm in the situation where I've got 8 books and I so want to go into a school, but I'm like, do I order 10 of each? Or how do I navigate that? That's
a really, really difficult one. And I remember the first time I like heart in my mouth. I think with The Secret Lake, I started off, I ordered 50, I think. The most I've ever ordered in one go is 250. And I was like nearly dying when they were bringing the boxes in the door. I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done? But the point was, the more I ordered, the better deal I got. But I then thought, hang on, I've got to think long term. Once I'd sort of tested the concept and knew that people like The Secret Lake, I just thought, well, if I'm never going to go into another school, then there's no point ordering hundreds. But if my long-term plan is over the next few years, I will be, I ought to order more. Now, I've just been into schools all this week for World Book Day, and I was in that same dilemma. Oops, the builders are starting again. I don't know whether, I hope it doesn't, we'll see how it goes. And I was very, unsure about how many to order. I actually ordered sort of 100 of each to top up what I had. It's very, very difficult to know how many you're going to sell. And a lot of it will depend on a combination of how engaged the person who is you're liaising with at the school is, and how well you give them the tools to promote your visit, and then how well they use those tools. And it really, really does make a big difference. So for example, last week I saw, about 2-3 weeks ago, I went to a school where I only saw 2 intakes, a year 2 and a year 3, and I sold in all 75 books, I think it was. And then last week I was at a school where I probably saw, I think, how many were there? There were about 600 children, and I sold 35 books. It's very, very difficult to know, but you get the sense it's usually because the person you've been dealing with hasn't been as efficient at using your promotional materials to get them out, to get the word out. Because it's not usually that people don't want the book, it's because they don't know you're coming, or somehow the message hasn't got through.
So what do you do to prepare your materials? What do you actually give to schools and to the contact person to help make sure that you're getting the word out as well as you can?
Okay, I do a couple of things. First of all is for whichever year groups I'm visiting, and that might be the whole school, it might just be one year group, it just depends. For each book or set of books, depending on what, so for example, The Secret Lake, Walter Brown, and Eek the Runaway Alien, they're all kind of targeted at similar age group. So if I was going into a school to see years 2, 3, and 4, I would provide a flyer which has the book cover of each book, a thumbnail of each book cover on it, a short summary of what the book's about and the age range it's aimed at, and then an order form at the bottom, a tear-off order slip, asking them to return, to place their orders, return them to the school office by a certain date. I usually ask them to do it ahead of my visit so that they can then email me a list of names before I come, so I can then pre-sign the books. Some schools won't want to do that. I find they don't mind. They kind of we get it organized ahead of time. And that I found minimal, because in the very early days, and this may be one of the things you asked, what would I do differently? I did just turn up. I wasn't really sure how many books I was going to sell. And then you have this sort of queue of children at the end, and then the school's running out of time because they've got to get to the next lesson. And I thought, well, hang on, how can I make this easier for all of us? And when schools are, unless you're going to be there at the end of the day, and then even then the parents might not know you're coming because they can't, you're going to sell more books if they know in advance. So I provide them that goes home, and maybe I send it to them. They send it out about a week and a half before I go. And if they send them in print rather than by email, you'll get a better response. There's all these little things. You try to influence them, but you can't necessarily. So really, you've got to kind of think of how can I make it as easy as possible for the teachers to promote my visit. And that comes down to providing promotional flyers with a tear-off slip, telling them to enclose the cash or a check made out to whoever you want it to. And I even do things like, my books are $5.99, and I'll put a little note on the bottom of the slip saying, if it's easier to enclose £6, Karen will give the extra 1p to charity. So once a year I might add up, roughly how many books I've sold, and then give £25 to a charity, because, then you don't end up with all these 99p, if you see what I mean. One other thing I would say to support, when I've only sort of done this actually this time round, is I've used Canva. Do you know the, Canva, C-A-N?
I've heard of it. You can tell me.
Okay. Canva.com. If you go on there, it's a fantastic resource. I don't have Photoshop. I have used it once or twice. I just can't justify the cost of it. But if you've got Photoshop, you won't need it. But Canva is free, and you can upload photos, and you can make posters and promotional things, download them again, and then send them to the school as a kind of reminder that they can put up around the school. So in November, I was going to a school, and I noticed they'd laminated them and stuck them on the tree bark and outside the gate. And it just said, pictures of my book covers, a picture of me, and it said author visit, Wednesday, the 13th of November, or whatever it was. Remember to bring your slips back. So it was kind of like another way of me slyly trying to make sure the school was reminding the parents. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of amazing tips in there. And
yeah.
your website is like, I was saying before we got online that I was almost going to bow out of the interview and just spend the rest of the night reading your website, because it's amazing. It's like so much. I wish I'd found it before I had published my first book, to be honest.
You're talking about my self-publishing website, I presume, not my. I have two websites. I have the author website, which is really aimed at readers, teachers, book buyers. And then I have, that's KarenInglisAuthor.com. And then I have selfpublishingadventures.com, where I really recorded my journey. And I did that as much for my benefit as for everyone else's, because I thought, if I don't write this down, I'm never going to remember how I did it, if you know what I mean.
I think it was the self-publishing adventures. I've got it still open in my background that I looked at, and like there's so much information on there. It's like step by step about the things you've learned and the things, you know, like it's wow.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing.
That slightly comes from my background in, I tend to be a kind of a natural reporter. Anything that happens, I like to write it down, if you know what I mean. As a child, I kept lots of diaries. And in my day job, my day job of being a consultant to the financial services industry, or government even, it has been involved writing about money and tax in plain English. And I was very keen to, in a sort of plain English kind of way, write out how I was going through this self-publishing journey. I mean, the irritating thing, but it's inevitable, is things change along the way. So sometimes I have to go in and sticky plaster and say, oh, this isn't quite up to date, and I'll come back and update it when I can. But one thing on websites, by the way, I think you, Eleanor, were asking earlier about book websites, or you mentioned to me, I do have websites for each book. I wouldn't, again, coming back to what Marti, you asked me, I would not recommend that, actually. I did that for the first couple, because I just had the books and nothing else. As I then got to be on 3 books, I realized this isn't realistic. I need one site that people come to. And hence we now have KarenInglisAuthor.com, and then each book is very clearly marked on there for you to go to. So, you know, I slowly want to close down, in a way, those other websites. I won't do that, but I'm not actively using them. And I would say the same for Facebook pages as well. Again, I started off with one for The Secret Lake, one for Eek, and you know, now I would just say have your author page, and rather than too many different, you know, places to have to keep up to date, as it were.
Yeah. So I know that you did a little bit for children's books. Can you tell us about that, and if that's a thing that you're going to keep going?
And Marti, it just cut out when you asked the question halfway through. What was the question? Sorry.
No, it's all good. I said, I know that you did some work with apps for children's books.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit, and whether that's something that you will continue?
Okay. First of all, to answer your last question, I won't be doing any more apps. It's just too much work. It's too much work for too little return. But equally, when I went into it, I went into it with eyes wide open, and I sort of suspected that would be the case. But I was very keen to, you know, this was this new thing coming along of apps, and because I was interested in it, I thought, you know, I'm just going to have a go and investigate. And I started off by looking at some of the off-the-shelf tools, which I'm trying to recall were around at the time. And discovered that they weren't really, the more I thought about what I wanted my app to do, they didn't have all the bells and whistles that I wanted. So I found a coder who actually very kindly offered to do it for free to begin with, because it was one of those things where it's the beginning of a new, it was a new product that was around, or it was a kind of a new world, and he was trying to find his way with children's books apps, as I was. Now, I did end up paying him in the end, because it all took so long. So I just thought, no, I will pay him. But I personally wouldn't, I'm not going to personally continue with it. I think they're great, but the getting discovered in the App Store is just, there is so much competition out there, and basically people want apps for nothing. There's this culture of apps should be free for children. And I made the mistake when I launched Ferdinand Fox's Big Sleep of making it free, and it immediately had something like 1,500 downloads. And then the minute I charged for it, all the downloads stopped. Now, since then, happily, it's picked up, and I think I saw, when I last checked, I think about 530 apps, which apparently is not bad. If you're not, it's not bad, but it's a slow process. And the other thing is that the App Store charges you something like $70 a year to actually be on there. So any profit I make is kind of virtually wiped out. So I'm not making any money on it. I'll leave it there as long as I'm not losing money, because I think it's a wonderful thing to have. And what I do is when I go into schools and I sell Ferdinand Fox's Big Sleep, I enclose a flyer that says, oh, by the way, there is an educational book app version of the story that you can download for £1.49 or whatever it is. But it's a huge amount of work. So until they come up with a software that I would say is intuitive and as intuitive and easy to use as Vellum is for ebooks, then I'll probably pass on it for now. So yeah.
That's definitely good info. I always have a little bit of envy when I am seeing people saying like, oh, we have ours in an app, because my books have a lot of illustrations in them and they just don't look as good. And if I had an app for them, that not only would they be more interactive, but they would be beautiful as well. But the exact thing that you just said is the thing that has kind of held me back from it, which is, how will I get people to see it? Like, this will be another separate place for me to be steering traffic to, and it sounds very daunting.
It is. I mean, the one thing do you have an enhanced, so you have ebooks of your books, Marti, don't you? And they have the illustration.
I do have ebooks.
Yeah. But, I'm just thinking for younger ones, I don't know. I mean, what I do have, which has worked well, but again, it sells a bit in the iBook store. But I think perhaps you're more successful than I am in the iBook store. Is I do have an enhanced ebook of Ferdinand Fox's Big Sleep, which has word highlighting as you read through, which for younger ones, is quite. That was far less painful, and I used a company called Ebook Partnerships, and that's on if you go to selfpublishingadventures.com, you'll find I've written a blog piece that I think it's up in the main menu, and it's called Picture Book to Ebook Conversion, and how I went about it and why I outsourced it. But they know what they're doing. So I would say, if you were thinking of trying to add some extra element to your ebook, even if it's not to turn it into an app, Ebook Partnership, I think it's just with a P, and there's a lady called Diane Horner and Matt Horner who run it, and they're here in the UK, but they do clients worldwide, and they're very, I highly rate them. But have a look at my article and you'll see why.
So does that mean that your books are wide and not in Kindle Select?
Did you ask me? Sorry, did you say, are they wide and not in Kindle Select? Was that your question?
Yeah.
No, they're wide. They're wide. I did have The Secret Lake in Kindle Select in the early days, but over time, what happened was I just noticed that the sales were going down and down, and I think it was not because. I think it's just because more and more people are self-publishing. There's much more competition in the market, and I couldn't really see what benefit that was going to give me by staying narrow. It wasn't as though I was really selling any more to make it worthwhile. A couple of times I went in and out to test that, and I couldn't justify it in the end. And then I've got a feeling they introduced that thing which I haven't really kept up with, where you have to read so many pages and then you might get some money. And I can't remember whether I thought that because my books aren't that long, whether I was at a disadvantage. I can't quite remember. But I think even though I don't sell hugely on the other stores, I just think it's important to be in all those other stores. So when I've got more time to do my marketing to the other stores, they're there, as it were.
And what sort of pricing do you have for your books, like in the ebook format? In
the ebook format, The Secret Lake is sort of $2.99 in a nutshell. do 99. I don't do 99 cents. I've never even done a 99-cent sale. I've never offered The Secret Lake for free, never once. I have done the first 4 chapters recently through Insta Freebie. And I would say my feeling is, and the only time I've made one of my books free is, again, Eek the Runaway Alien on an Insta Freebie promotion, which I think several of us were in on a few weeks ago. Marti, you might have been on that one as well. And
I think so.
In hindsight, I must talk to Justin to find out whether I might change that to a 1 to 4 chapters. I think the way to go is to give them a taster chapter and not the whole thing. I think I've found, I can't really tell, but by but anyway, the whole point about that is people could, coming back to the question of having them on all platforms, people can then, download them and have them in the format they want, if you see what I mean. It's not just Kindle. And also the whole select thing, you're suddenly into, am I allowed to do this, that, and the other? And you've got to think about, it's too limiting, I'd say.
I want to hear the thing you were going to say about free. Like, what were you going to say about not having your books for free? You said you were just about to draw a conclusion.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't write any series. I'm completely nonsense. I should do, but I don't. So maybe if you've got a first in a series, I've heard that works certainly for the adult book market. I don't know whether it does for children's because I don't have a free book. A first in series. So certainly if you've only got standalone books, I don't know. I don't see any evidence from the Eek free that I've given away that it's necessarily led to more sales of my other books. I think there is a certain amount of truth that people load up their Kindles with free books and then never get round to reading them, if you know what I mean. So I kind of, while I've only got 5 books, I'm not a prolific, as you can see. I'm not like some of you who are amazing, and I just take my hat off to how much writing you managed to get done. It's just amazing, Marti. I just feel I would rather hook them in with the story, and then if they really want more, they'll go and get it, and they'll be a much more engaged customer, I suppose. What I ought to do is find them a moment to write a free prequel, for example, maybe to The Secret Lake, something like that. I mean, that's an idea that's in my head. I'm just so busy all the time. It's finding the time to do it. The other thing I have done, which you may or may not have noticed, which is kind of interesting, and I'm not sure whether I'm not certain it has led to more sales, but I thought I would try it, is I have created a kind of anthology. It's called Story Stack. And if you go onto my Amazon page or iBooks, and what Story Stack is, I've put the first 3 chapters of each book into a kind of all into one book called Story Stack, and kind of combine the book covers. And I thought, well, this might be a way I can have a perma-free book. So if you go and have a look, and that gets downloaded hugely. And at first, when I saw the downloads, I thought, oh, there'll be loads of sales following on. There haven't really. And it kind of cemented in my mind, well, perhaps again, it's people downloading who aren't getting around to reading it. And don't forget, we've of course got that extra barrier that it's the parents are downloading, but it's the kids, isn't it? So whether they then pass them on to the kids or get round to it, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there will have been some follow-on sales, but it's very, very long tail. But that for me is one way, perhaps I thought that's the only way I could justify doing one of these perma-frees is like a sample of all the books, because I don't have a series read that I could do it with.
Yeah. I've seen book samplers. I haven't seen yours, so I'll have a look out for it. But I've seen book samplers on free charts on like different children's book categories. The thing that I noticed about them most actually was that they would have low star ratings, but then when you read the actual reviews, it was people saying it wasn't a whole book. It wasn't a whole book, which I thought was interesting because they seemed to be clearly labeled. So then that made me a little bit nervous about that. Do you mind? Because I won't feelings hurt, but we find that a lot of times people will say like, really like sold hugely for me, but hugely, like it has like a huge range of what that means depending on where you are in your career. When you say that it's being downloaded hugely, or you didn't say that, I added that word in, but when you say that it's being downloaded a lot, what does that mean for you?
Oh, what, for the free story stack, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah, I say yes. Take that slightly with a pinch of salt, but just to put it into context, last time I looked, and I won't click off because I'm worried I'll lose you. It's very often in children's, certainly, well, in the States, it's been number 1 or number 2 in the category for children's ebooks, humorous. So it's been, when I first launched it, it was at, I think the highest it got was like 200 or maybe 500 in the Kindle free sales, as it were, and it hovers often in the low 5,000s and in top of subcategory. But I'm just trying to remember on the best days how many. It might have done 35 a day on the best days, and now it's selling every day maybe 5 to 10 to, I don't know, something like that. So yes, no, we're not talking romance numbers or anything like that, but enough.
None of us are talking romance numbers. That's why it's useful for us to share.
Enough that I would have thought, when certainly in those early days, I'll have to look and how many numbers. Enough that I would have thought, oh, I might see some knock on. But when I didn't, I thought, well, actually, we in children's authors, we've got this barrier because everything we're doing is going to the parents, who then have got to find the time to pass that on to the kids, and yada yada, as we know, until the kids are holding the purse strings, it's much harder, isn't it? Yeah. And by the way, I used Vellum to create that ebook, and as we all know, Vellum is so easy. You can virtually copy and paste from one to the other to create your kind of anthology, as it were.
It's amazing. I love Vellum to death, don't I, Marti? I'm always going on about it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've said to the guys there,
and I'm always feeling jealous about it.
Yeah, Brad is. Yeah, they are amazing. Yeah.
I've even started writing my books in Vellum. Like, I have Scrivener, but I read on one of their blogs or something, I read somewhere that they wrote, some people write their books inside Vellum, and I'm like, I would love to do that. And I do that now, and I actually love writing the book directly inside.
Oh, you do it into Vellum directly? Oh, wow. I mean, I always just use Word and then copy it and paste, but, you can
even dictate straight into Vellum. You can dictate straight into Vellum. It's amazing.
Oh, really? Can you? God, I need to get up to speed. I hadn't realized that.
Wow.
I mean, the other thing
is intense. You are a true Vellum convert there.
Wow. I've been emailing them every day going, when is the paperback version coming out? When is the paperback version coming out?
Oh, yeah. It'd be fantastic. I mean, the great thing for children's authors to understand about Vellum is the ease with which you can insert your images. That is a real game changer for me, because up to then I was having to use a formatter, and I'm very fussy, as most indies are. I like having total control over my project, and I have a wonderful illustrator who, by the way, lives in Bosnia. We've never met, so we've done everything on the internet, but I have all that artwork, and it's just great to be able to drop it in to Vellum. And it's like having a magic wand, and there it is. It's just fantastic. Yeah. It
is. I love that you've sort of broken that, indie advice that I hear all the time, which is you must have a series. You must, and you don't. And you're selling books and you're doing amazing. And one of the things that struck me on the Self-Publishing Adventure website was, and I mean this genuinely, I'll normally go to someone's website and it's like, it's all about them, which it's meant to be kind of, but I went to the Self-Publishing Adventure website and it was all about your books. And I was like, I want to read these books. Like, it had that effect on me. It's like you loved them, you sort of shared something about the book, like you loved those books, and I wanted to get them. And I thought that felt quite distinctly different to how I would respond as a reader to other authors' websites.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to really be passionate about your books, otherwise there's no point doing it. And I think, I'm not very good at, I know there are strategies I've read where you can go and see what's selling and then write something in that genre. I'm just useless at that. I have to. And one of the big talks I do when I go into schools about the magic of being a writer and where my ideas come from is they do sort of come to me. I don't, you know, they kind of come. Suddenly something happens that then I start getting an idea that I can't let go of. And that's how my stories come. I should make time to do more. I've always got, you know, too much on, you know. But, you know, and in fact, I was telling in the school I went to, I don't know if either of you are a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's my first bit of advice for everyone who asks, who is foolish enough to ask me for advice.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I was asked to speak at their conference here in the UK in November. So I went down to it, and I hadn't been a member up to then. I was a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors. I just thought I'd been too busy to join. But it's fantastic. And David Armand, the UK author, I don't know if you've heard of the book called Skellig by David Armand. It's an amazing, it was a very big seller over here. I don't know how well it's done anywhere else, but it's a real classic. And it's about a young boy who finds a sort of weird skeleton, funny creature in his garage. Anyway, David Armand was saying how he had just delivered his last children's book. I don't know what it was. It had driven him mad. He posted it in his post box. And I thought, oh, thank God for that. I'm just going to now walk home and I don't have to do anything now for a while. And he said he was walking down the road and he overheard a man say to his wife, I found it in the garage. And he said, I just couldn't get this phrase out of my head. And I got home and I thought, oh my God. Oh, leave me alone. I've got to write this book now. And this idea just came to him. And I'm a bit like that with my stories. They come to me and then I write them, but I'm not that prolific because maybe that's because I wait for the stuff to come. But I guess I'm also being in India. I don't know about you. I'm just so busy the whole time anyway, trying to learn the new technology, and you know, I need my own marketing department, really.
We all do. We all do.
I think that you might have like stumbled upon or accidentally said part of the answer to my next question, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask you one, and then probably Elena has one more. She always has at least one more. But you've been doing this for a really long time, and we've talked to a lot of people who've like come in and sort of burned out on it, and some of them have been like burned out on it for long enough that they actually came back, which is great. But it seems like you've been going pretty steady. What do you think what are you doing that has had you be able to have such longevity?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to be determined. You have to believe in yourself. It's like you hear a lot of artists, whether it's musicians, I think it is really just believing in yourself and having that determination and being prepared to fail, but pick yourself up again, because a lot of it's hard. And one thing I would say, for example, about, say, getting into schools is it can be very disheartening trying to get bookings, call up, get past the school secretary. It just is such different receptions you get, you know. But I just think it's believing in yourself, or it's how much you want to get your stories out in front of those children. At the same time, keeping up with what's going on in the market. And we've all found, as we found with, you know, through Mark Dawson, through InstaFreebie, through the 10K Children's Group, there are, you know, if you find like-minded people who are like you can perhaps find ways together to get your word out about your book. So what's kept me going is really a genuine wish to share my stories with children. And even though I know I'm not going to make the sort of money J.K. Rowling makes, I'm not really in it for the money, although I'm trying to be in it so I don't lose money, if you know what I mean. But for me, the pleasure, I would rather go into a school and sell 200 books and get no fee than go in and get a big fee and sell 10 books, if you know what I'm saying. So, you know, what has kept me going, the other thing has kept me going is every day new tools coming around to help democratize the whole book selling market, the way that Vellum has helped us now make it easier to get ebooks out, just all these tools for making out, you know, Amazon advertising, I think, is a big one as well, because now finally we've got a platform where you can promote your book at a time when people are looking for books. Whereas I probably should give Facebook another go, but I guess I found it was eating up my money and I wasn't really seeing any evidence of selling books, if you know what I mean. I was just probably doing it all wrong, but yeah.
Well, my final question is more around the networking, because what I notice is, like, you're famous, like everyone knows you. You know, I'm sorry, that's just how it comes across. Like, you know, you're like well known. It's like Karen, you know. So how important has that networking with other you know, organizations, like, you know, like you mentioned a few, obviously, and other authors, and actually physically networking with them? Has that been like a big change to your career in terms of getting out and about?
It hasn't been, it's been done organically. I haven't sort of set out to go and network. I've just followed what has interested me. And I just happened, when the Alliance of Independent Authors was created at the London Book Fair in 2012, I was at the London Book Fair. It takes place 10 minutes up the road from my house, by the way. And when I found it, I think I went along and I met Orna, and she just launched it. I was like, oh my God, thank God there's some other people like me, because I had been totally on my own doing what I was doing since 2010 up to that point, you know. And the minute you start to meet other indie authors, as we've all found, I mean, we've been chatting away, we've never spoken before, but we're all kind of quite like-minded, aren't we? We're all quite determined people. And so, you know, so joining the Alliance of Independent Authors started to know more people that way. And I'm now their sort of children's advisor. I'm kind of on hand because I've got but that came about really, they asked me because I had my Self-Publishing Adventures website, and I obviously was pioneering trying these different things, but it was all done just because I wanted to, if you like, from a sort of fairly natural perspective. I do now go out to, I've joined something here in London called Bite the Book, BYTE the book. I was a bit nervous about that to begin with, because there's a lot of traditionally published authors there, and you always think, oh, you know, here I am, the indie. But again, that's changing. There's a lot of, the whole world, as we probably all found. I mean, I think the UK is probably behind America in this, but attitudes are so different now to self-published authors than they used to be. And to the extent that when I go into schools, I talk about author publishing to what we call year 5 and year 6. So these are the kids who are sort of age 10, 11, who are probably at the top end of my books. And I think they're probably more interested in knowing how books get made and what have you. But I mean, coming back to that point, is the networking I'm doing is not just in self-publishing arenas now. It's by going to things like Bite the Book. I meet people. I've tested recently something for Nielsen Market Research. They're called book biblets. I think I blogged about them. You'll find them on my blog. And I will be going to their children's, I've just signed up with them. I'm going to go to at the London Book Fair, they do an in-depth study of the children's book market, which I'll be attending that at the London Book Fair in later this month. In fact, next week. What am I talking about? It's London Book Fair next week. And there again, I'm slowly getting to know people who aren't necessarily just self-publishing children's books. They're actually in the industry in market research or running websites. There's a website called Topster over here in the UK. I don't know if there's one in the States. It's quite good in that it's a website. It's toppsta.com. And it's a website that it's targeting parents to get their children to review books online. Now, they will make their money, because if you buy the books through them, they then get a commission. But the clever thing about it is that they're getting the kids to review the books, but they've got in place some kind of authentication process whereby a parent has to kind of be the group captain for their kids or whatever, if you follow me. I think it's probably easier to go and have a look. But I've met, the woman who runs that, I met her at a conference last year. So I'm kind of getting out there a little bit where budget will allow. But, it's expensive going to some of these things, so I can't do many of them. But it's more because I'm interested to know what's going on and how reading habits are changed. And I mean, my holy grail is kids suddenly all start buying Kindles, buying more ebooks.
I'm waiting for that day. I'll have 50
to lighten
by
the
then.
mood a bit.
That's what I'm waiting for. I've got a plan that I'll have 100 books and suddenly it goes boom and I'm at the head of the game. What do you reckon? Can I wake up now?
It sounds like a winner.
But that also, don't get me wrong, going out and meeting the kids is just so, it's worth it. It's fantastic. Yeah,
Definitely.
Well, it has been lovely to have you on, Karen. It sounds like we're going to have be able to have you on again if you're willing, because
yes.
you dropped a few things that I think require following up on our part, some things that you're trying out. So thank you again. And all of the websites and the places that we should look up, like ebook partnership and other places that Karen mentioned on the show today, will be in the show notes. www.kidlitpodcast.com. And Elena, is there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, just Karen, tell us the websites where people can find you online if they're listening.
Yes, so selfpublishingadventures.com if you want advice on self-publishing, and KarenInglisAuthor.com if you want to find out more about my books. Or I also have a YouTube channel as well. So Google my name if you want to find out about the books. And yeah, if you've got kids aged up to age 12, check them out.
Awesome. I do. I have 2 kids in that age group, so we'll check them out. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous. Thank you very much.
Wonderful having you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, not at all. Okay. Have a nice day, as they say.